So what about this? Now, these are the parts that I like the best. You probably initially are intimidated by these. When you get words, you're not liking that because the math isn't obvious then. But it really is the best part of math because it's the part of math that actually means something, right? I mean, I shouldn't say that. Math, abstract math, is important too. But this is the part of math that describes the way the world works, right? Math describes the way the world works. So how about this? The height h in feet of a golf ball after t seconds is given by this equation, okay, where h is the height of the ball and t is the time after it's hit, okay? Find how long it takes the golf ball to return to the ground. Okay, what are the steps we kind of go through here? I mean, I hate giving like these recipes. I don't hate it, but there's a part of me sometimes where I feel like that's a little bit contrived. But these are some basic problem-solving steps you can sort of go through that make sense. First one is understand the problem, which means probably read it and reread it until you can make sense of it. And a lot of times that's not on the first reading. It might be several readings before you really start to grasp what's going on. The second part is, I would say, the trickiest part. It's not even a math part. It's just converting from words to math symbols, right? So what is that? How do I translate this situation into a math problem, an equation, hopefully, that I could just sink my teeth into and solve? What do you think? Well, what does this mean? Return to the ground. What's significant about the ground here?
It's zero.
What's zero?
The ground.
But what is zero? You're right. But what variable is equal to zero at the ground? H. Yeah, exactly. Right. The height of the golf ball is zero at the ground. So that's the translation would be, aha, we can take this equation and just set h equal to zero and solve, right? Which means I get the equation, the polynomial equation, negative 16t squared plus 96t equals zero. Okay, so now it's already in standard form. Now we're going to solve this thing by factoring, right? So what do we always try to do first? GCF. Okay, so is the GCF, if there is one, is the GCF going to be positive or negative?
Negative.
It's going to be negative because remember what we said, the GCF always takes the sign of the leading coefficient, right? So what could I undistribute? Well, it turns out 16 goes into 96. So I could factor out a negative 16, and then could I take a variable? I could take a t, yep. Okay, so the first step is factor out my GCF, which is a negative 16t. And what does that leave behind? Well, we could just answer the question. Negative 16t times what is negative 16t? I have to multiply by a t to get my t squared. Negative 16t times what is positive 96t? Well, I'd have to multiply
6 minus 6.
6 times 16 is 96, right? So I'd have a negative 6 times a negative 16 is positive 96, right? So that's how that thing factors when I undistribute my GCF. Now, this is easy, right? And really, once we got to this point here, what's kind of nice about this is I can just forget about the words for a while. Now I'm in math mode. I just flip a switch and I'm in algebra mode and I'm solving this equation. Okay, well, what are the solutions? I've got this thing factored into how many factors? Show me with your fingers. How many factors are there? The answer is 2. That's the first factor is my GCF, right? Okay, well, what's the solution? What value of t makes the GCF 0? 0, right? Doesn't negative 16t equals 0 when t equals 0, right? How about the second one? T minus 6 equals 0 when t is 6. Okay, so there are my two mathematical solutions, 0 and 6. Now I just have to interpret this, right? We found the math solutions. Now we've got to apply this to our specific problem, right, which involved golf balls. So which one of those is the one we want? How long does it take the golf ball to return to the ground? Which one makes the most sense? 6. So it took 6 seconds. The math gods they're wise though. They don't really give us extraneous information here. They tell us stuff that has meaning. It just may not be the exact application we're looking for. 0 means something. It just wasn't the solution we wanted. How come 0 works? Think about that. T is the time after hitting the golf ball, right? Well, what does the time of 0 represent? Yeah, that's right at the very start. Right as I'm making contact with the golf ball, what is its height? 0, yeah. So it is 0 at that time.
0.26?
0.26, right? There's 2 times when the golf ball is on the ground. At t equals 0, right before I hit it, and at t equals 6 when it comes down. The one we're looking for is 6, right? But the 0, it's there for a reason. It's just not the one we want. Okay, so there we go. 6 seconds is our answer. Okay, let's look at maybe one more of these, and then we'll save just one for tomorrow. It's a real quick one for tomorrow, just to get us warmed up. How about this one? The product of 2 consecutive positive integers is 132. Find the 2 integers. Okay, so I guess we know what's going on. We just got 2 integers multiplied together. We better maybe assign a variable here, right? Because they didn't give us any variables in this one. So let's call it x. We'll just always use x because that's what we're used to. What should x equal in this case? First integer, sure. X is the first integer, so what would the second one be? We'd rather just use one variable, but if they're consecutive, what does that mean? No. Like, somebody give me an example of 2 consecutive integers.
7 and 8.
7 and 8, or 10 and 11.
So 2x.
Okay, so again, like if the first integer is 14,
X plus 2.
the next one is
Plus
15,
2x.
right? If the first integer is 20, the next consecutive one is 21. If the first integer is 35, what's the next one?
36.
How'd you get that?
Plus 1.
Okay, so then what's the next one?
X plus 1.
X plus 1. There you go. Okay? Make sense? The next consecutive integer is 1. Now, you guys, if you said plus 2, you were thinking of like consecutive even integers or odd integers or something, right? We're just talking about consecutive integers. Okay, so then we've got our variables, x and x plus 1. Those are my first and second consecutive integers. How are we going to turn this into an equation so we can just focus on math? Well, let's take this statement up here. The product of 2 consecutive positive integers, product means what? Multiplication. So what is that going to be? If my integers are x and x plus 1, what's the product of the 2? Okay, but I'm talking about just, forget this part. The product of 2 consecutive integers. We used variables to define our integers. How do I say the product of those 2 things? Isn't that just x times x plus 1? There's the product of my 2 integers. This times that, right? Is, well, what's is?
Equals.
And then 132, right? So, again, there's how we would build this up. The product of 2 consecutive integers is x times x plus 1 is equals 132. And now we can flip into algebra mode. Forget the words and just solve. What do I do to solve that? We're getting to be pros at this. Distribute. Now what?
Make it equal to 0.
Make it equal to 0, so I subtract 132. Now I've got to factor this thing, right?
Yep.
I have to find magic numbers that multiply to negative 132 and add to 1. So they're positive and a negative. The positive is 1 bigger.
1 times negative.
So 2 numbers that are only 1 apart that multiply to 132.
Oh, so negative 1. No.
What 2 numbers that are next to each other multiply to 132?
Oh, it, I don't know.
What is it? 11 and 12. Yeah.
Jump to it.
Okay. So then we end up with the positive one is the bigger one. So I get x plus 12 times x minus 11. And you all would have found those numbers. They just might have taken a few more seconds. But so what are my solutions? First one is negative 12 or
11.
positive 11. So those are my math solutions. Okay, which one do I want to keep? If we're looking for two consecutive positive integers, the first one, x, would have to be 11, wouldn't it? Right? So our answers are going to be 11 and one more than that. X plus 1 would be 11 plus 1, 12. Right? So I get 11, positive 11, and positive 12. Does the negative 12 work? Sure. If negative 12 is my first integer, what's the next one? What's one bigger than negative 12? Negative 11. Well, negative 12 times negative 11 is 132, but those are negative numbers and we wanted positive ones. Therefore, we keep that one for our first. Okay, make sense? Okay, let's wrap it up. That's a lot. Tomorrow we'll look at one more quick example and then you can work.